This demonstration will show how you can get some variation in value change even within a single inked block. This is the blue plate from a 4-color print that I made of this little hot air balloon. And after I'd proofed it with all 4 colors together, I realized I really would like a little bit more value difference in the cloud area and the sky. And I also wanted to try to get the blues in the mountains to have more variation so that it had a better sense of light and shadow. So I'm going to show you how to do some kiss printing, which means that you're varying the amount of pressure that you're using as you're printing the block so that some areas will become almost like a half tone and other parts of the block will be printed at full value. So I have my plate already inked up. It's about a standard amount of ink. I haven't over inked it or under inked it. I just try to ink it the way I would ink it if I were running it through a press. And kiss printing works best on kind of thin washi paper. This is a Japanese paper and it's somewhat transparent. So as you're rubbing over the back of your image, once you get the ink on there, you can start to see the image through the paper. But even if you're printing on a much heavier weight paper like the one I was using to do the 4-color printing, and even though it's hard to see through the back of this kind of paper, I'm going to show you how you can find out exactly where those shapes need to be so that you don't accidentally burnish areas that you did not intend to burnish. I'm going to go ahead and put on a piece of, this is just inexpensive sketch paper. It's somewhat porous, so I think we'll begin to see our design through the back side. I've put it on my registration pins and drop it down into position. The first thing I'm going to do, rather than start with the wooden spoon, is to just use the palm of my hand, and I'm trying not to let the hard part of my rings rub against the print. I'm just using the soft section of my hands to use a pretty light pressure. So I can see I'm just barely picking up any ink. I can press a little bit harder than that. But again, I'm trying not to put too much pressure on any one spot. I don't want to have it to be splotchy. I want kind of a nice overall halftone. I can start to see my hot air balloon a little bit through here, but I want even a little bit more of a guideline to follow. So this is the sheet that I used when I did the offset printing to transfer my key block to my other plates, and I still had a copy of that, so I turned it into a burnishing guide, and it's hole punched so that we can check our progress as we go. But this way I can burnish some areas without burnishing others that are nearby. So I'm going to try to put a little bit of extra pressure on the part of the balloon where I want the blues to be nice and vibrant. So I'll burnish them full pressure. Here I need to be a little bit careful on this side so that I don't extend over the edge of the balloon shape into the sky, create streaks out there that I didn't want. And you want to be careful not to have your fingers pressing hard on the plate because that also will burnish those parts of the block. Now let's say that we want to have some light on one side of the mountain. So let's decide. I think we're going to try to not burnish on this side, but I will burnish on, and in fact, I'm going to use the end of the spoon so that I have even more control. I think I will burnish this mountain that's back in the background too a little bit more so it shows up. And then we'll burnish this side. That will have more shadows from the black plate coming in. And then I could decide down here if I want these feels. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of draw with the end of my spoon to try to bring in some of the plants on the fields there. I could even burnish a little bit harder on the shadow side of the tree if I wanted to have some different values of light and dark on the trees themselves. So it's almost a monotype. I'm almost doing a one-of-a-kind image here, but you can see that you can get some really beautiful kind of linear effects. And then with the clouds, I might just use, I wanted a little more variation in the background, but maybe not such sharp definition as I would get if I had used the spoon. So I'm just using a little more pressure on my thumb. And because we have the registration jig all pinned together, it's safe to go ahead and check it without worrying about things. So I'm getting a little bit of variation in the sky. It depends how dark I want that sky to go. Maybe I'll press a little bit harder at the top and then kind of ease off on the pressure as we get closer to the horizon so that we have a little more contrast there where the mountains are, and leave the sky a little bit lighter right above that. So again, I'm pressing pretty hard up here. And then not pressing much at all in the sky right above the fields. It's still pretty subtle. I like what's happening with the mountains though, so I think I'm going to leave that as it is. I burnished a little bit more in the clouds. So here I will use the spoon a little bit, but again, I'm thinking about if these marks show, I want it to look deliberate. So I'm burnishing in a way that it's going to create streaks across, horizontal streaks across the sky, instead of just kind of a random scribbling. And I think I will burnish a little bit more around the hot air balloon. These are some sandbags that are in the shadow, and also bring up the silhouette of that little guy. Go ahead and flip that over so we can take a look at it. You can see it's almost like a drawing. These are areas where I had not cut the plate at all, but we can still get some different tones of blue. I didn't quite burnish all the way up to the edge there. And I could put it back on since we've got the registration pins and get it in a pretty close registration to that same spot. But this is kind of nice how we're able to bring this edge of the balloon out, even though it's not carved on the block there. You can create some different value ranges and use it as a drawing tool almost. Now this would be very hard to addition consistently, so it would be unlikely to be part of a group addition or an additioned off image, but you could treat it as a like a trial proof, since the block itself hasn't changed, but the way the ink has been applied is a little bit different. So I probably would label this TP for trial proof instead of trying to include it in with other prints that were quite a bit different. So I wanted to show you the difference here. I've done a kiss print before using two slightly different backgrounds here. And so this is one where I intentionally lifted off a little bit more of the ink from the block before I even put the paper on it. And then in some other areas, I just didn't press quite as hard. So there's a couple of approaches. You can either use the pressure and the spoon to create some value differences, or you might do a little selective wiping on the plate before you even put the paper on there so that there's just not as much ink in those spots to pick up in the first place. I hope that gives you some options.